Okay, so I'm going to show you a really cool effect that I first covered in Photoshop TV last week. Got a lot of great feedback on the effect that I'm going to show you here. One of the things a lot of people said was the video is a little bit too small, or we kind of went a little bit fast. So it's a little bit hard to do a 7 or 8 minute tutorial in that Photoshop TV, and this is such a good effect that I wanted to make sure I got it across to everybody. So what we're going to do here is essentially add this page curl effect just to an ordinary photo. So this is what we'll start with. And then this is what we'll finish up with, and we're going to use a new feature in Photoshop CS2 called Warp, and that'll help us add this page curl effect. Alright, to get started here, I'm just going to open up this photo without any of the effects applied to it, and I'm going to create a small rectangle. So I'm going to grab the rectangular marquee tool. I'm just going to draw out a rectangle over the left side of the photo here. Once I get that rectangle created, I'm going to choose Layer, New, and pick Layer via Copy. Look at the shortcut for that. It's Control J, Command on the Mac, and I'm going to press that, and that's going to punch out that area that I selected onto its own layer. Now, first thing I want to do here is actually reduce the opacity of this background layer, and this is just to help me see the parts of the photo that I'm punching out here. Alright, next thing we'll do is control click on this layer, and it's going to put a selection around what I just punched out from the original layer here. I'm going to make sure I have my rectangular marquee selected. I'm going to put my cursor in the middle of this selection, move it to the right, and also hold down my shift key just so I can constrain it. And you notice now I can start to plan this selection. I can see where it is compared to the other selection. That's why I reduced the opacity of the main photo. Alright, now let's click once on this bottom layer, and we'll press Control J again, and that's going to duplicate that area onto its own layer. And I'm just going to do that same step all over again. Control click on it, put my cursor in the middle, move it to the right, and hold down the shift key to constrain it, and then make sure I click once in this background layer and Control J one more time. Now at this point I can go and I can increase the opacity of the background layer, and I may need to do that for the other layers too, because you remember I duplicated them or from the background layer. So everything's at 100% opacity now. Next thing we'll want to do is add a stroke. So I'm just going to control click on this layer, and I'm going to choose Edit, Stroke, and here I'm going to pick inside for the location, and I'm going to type in about 15 pixels and make this color white. Let's move that color picker into the screen here. I'm going to make it white, press OK, and you can see here it added a stroke around the photo. Now I actually don't think that's a large enough stroke, so I'm going to undo here, and I'm going to choose Edit, Stroke again, and let's bump that up to 20 pixels. I've got a fairly high resolution photo here. Now I'll click on OK, and that looks better. If you want to, you can increase it even a little bit further if you want. To deselect, if you noticed I had my selection around the stroke, just press Control or Command D, and that deselects it. Let's do the same thing for the photos below it. Edit, Stroke, keep that at 20 pixels, and then do the same thing for the one below it. Control click on the layer, that loads that selection again. Remember, Control click loads the selection, then choose Edit, Stroke, 20 pixels, and now I've got my stroke around that layer. So now essentially here I've got 3 new layers. If I hide them, you can see I don't have any of those strokes around here. I've got those 3 layers. Now we want to start warping them. So to do this, I'm going to choose Edit, Transform, Warp, and this is a new feature in Photoshop CS2. And here's where it gets pretty cool. Let's zoom in a little bit here. Here's where it gets fun. I can take these edges and I can start curling them in, but it does more than just warp it. Watch it as I start bringing it over. See how it starts showing me the back of the photo? That's a pretty neat effect. We can fake a page curl or a page curl effect in a previous version of Photoshop, but we don't get that effect where we can start to see the background of our photo. So that's pretty cool. And maybe we'll just start to move this one maybe down a little bit. We'll do the same thing at the bottom here. Actually, that's going a little bit too far. And let's curl that up a little bit. Press the Enter key, and that confirms your warp setting. Now let's move over to the center picture. Click on that layer to target it. Now here's a shortcut to get into warp mode. Press Control or Command T. That gets you into free transform. And you see this little icon up here? You can just press that icon. It switches between free transform and warp mode. So now I'm back into my warp mode here, and see how we're over the face? You don't want to do too many crazy warp settings here. I definitely don't want to do a page curl warp here. I guess I could if that's the effect you were looking for, but you need to be a little careful. So I'm just going to extend this one a little bit, maybe drop that one down slightly. I'm over the hair here, so I can probably get a little bit uh, more crazy with that one. And then this one over here, again, you don't want to go too crazy with it. You don't want to distort the face too much. Press the Enter key. Now we'll move to the last layer, and I'll go back into warp mode here. And this one I can probably get a little bit more crazy on, especially over here. I'll bring that all the way in to kind of give me that curling effect. This one, it's okay. I can extend that hair out. Down here, I can do the same. I can even probably pull this one up down here if I wanted to. And then up top, maybe we'll just move that one off to the center a little bit. Press the Enter key. Now I'll press Control minus, and that zooms out. And by itself, it doesn't look too great. It's missing one key factor here, and that is a drop shadow. So first thing we'll do here is I'm going to double click on this layer. That'll bring up my layer style dialog box. Add a drop shadow. I'm going to drop the opacity down to about 50%. And we'll move that out and see if we can see our drop shadow here. And maybe start to increase the size a little bit. Just going to increase the size and the spread there. I'll show you my settings. Here we go. So there we go. I got about 68% opacity, and I dropped the size down to about 68 pixels. So press OK. Now here's a neat little trick. To duplicate this layer style, just hold down the Alt key, so the Option key on the Mac, and then just drag it to the other layers that you want it on. I can drag it to each layer there. So now I've got my drop shadow on. There's one more thing that we can do to finish this effect off. I'm going to click once on the bottom layer, and I'm going to click on the adjustment layers here. Let's just go to Layer, and we'll go to New Adjustment Layer, and we'll pick Hue Saturation. And there's a couple things that I can do here. Opens up this hue saturation dialog box. I can maybe decrease the saturation of the photo below it, and that'll give that a black and white effect, and it'll keep what's on top of it color. I can also reduce the lightness just to kind of give it that back screened effect. So there's a few different things that I can do here. And if you want, I mean, you can even change the color of the background photo depending on what effect you're looking for here. So I actually think the black and white effect, and I'll drop I'll move that lightness up, kind of give me that back screened effect. That looks pretty good. So essentially what we've done here is we've used the warp feature in Photoshop CS2, and we've created a really cool looking cover or poster for with just kind of that page curl effect for it. So hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Make sure you visit us at the forums at photoshopuser.com in the NAP members website area. You can go on the forums. If you've got any questions, it's a great place to go and post your questions. I frequent the forums, and there's a lot of good users on there too. They can answer your questions for you too. So hope you enjoyed. We'll see you again next time. Thanks.